welcome to LDM Radio Sports Talk, the show that talks about sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. Joining me this week is Scott Blander from Pennsylvania.
Hey, it's been a
Yeah, good
while.
to be back. Man, it's been so long. It's awful that we can't do this as much as I would like to, but it's always good to be sitting in the chair and having sports conversations. That is one of my favorite things to do. So we're gonna jump right into the NBA, which we don't really talk about enough, but there was a very big story going on local too when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets. Now we have our situation with the two Mercurial superstars with Kevin Durant and right now, as far as the Kyrie Irving aspect of it, um, he was he had to opt into next season at 36 million. It looked like he was going to possibly leave as a free agent and then sign on with the Los Angeles Lakers for their $6 million exception. But that didn't happen. He ended up opting in 36 million for next season, and then we have Kevin Durant, who at this point right now has requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. And as far as his timeline goes, he ended up starting his career in OKC, Oklahoma City Thunder, and he did really well over there. He ended up becoming a superstar, drafted second overall, and making the most of it, especially with Greg Oden being selected number one. So Oklahoma City definitely got the better end of that deal. And then he comes in, ends up leaving as a free agent to the Golden State Warriors 1 year after he had a 3-1. Oklahoma City Thunder had a 3-1 series lead on the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors ended up coming back, winning that series, and then eventually winning the title. And then he ends up leaving as a free agent to join the Golden State Warriors. And at this point, he kind of damaged his legacy a little bit because he didn't do what, let's say, a Michael Jordan did, or Kobe Bryant, as far as staying with your team and then staying with the team that drafted you and then having success with them and bringing them a championship. It's very debatable at that point, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And then he ends up winning two titles out of 3 years in Golden State with the Warriors, and then he ends up leaving the Golden State Warriors to allegedly make a name for himself and be able to win championships without the heavy talented and homegrown Golden State Warriors, which were already an established team before he got there. And he ends up going to the Brooklyn Nets, and Kyrie Irving ends up joining him. And then there's these huge expectations everywhere from Brooklyn, New York, all across the league. This looked like a match made in heaven, and they're gonna contend for titles and all these other wonderful things potentially happening. He ends up not playing the first season that he was signed for because he tore his Achilles in the conference finals that year, so he was out the entire next season, which was the first year in Brooklyn. And then the second year in Brooklyn, they ended up getting bounced by the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs. And then last year, they ended up getting swept in the first round by the Boston Celtics. And right now, it's to the point where there's reports coming out that the Nets owner has had enough of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. He wants them both not to be on the team. It's all alleged stuff because nobody really knows what's going on. I mean, there's all types of reports and different things coming out that really anybody can print anything, and then it would be believable at this point because of how crazy this whole timeline has gone. And now, so let me get some of your perspective on how all of this has went down from your standpoint. I know you don't love the NBA enough, but this is these are it's pretty much a transitional thing that can go from sport to sport. You don't really have to know the X's and O's of basketball to see what's going on here. What's your take on what's going on in Brooklyn?
Well, it's hilarious. First of all, you mentioned Kobe, and you mentioned Jordan. Those we live in a different era across the board, pretty much all sports, but really magnified in the NBA as far as a lack of loyalty. Now I get it; it's a business. It's not only a business for the teams; it's a business for the players. They have a very short shelf life of a career at the pro level, so you want to get as much money as possible. With that being said, you sign a contract, and the Nets took a big gamble on him by signing him when he was out. He was injured for an entire year. They showed some loyalty right there and scooped him up, while he was, rehabbing his knee for an entire season. So they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. He signs a $194 million 4-year deal, 189 guaranteed. He's making $43 million a year. They have one bad year, they made the playoffs, one bad playoff year, and he wants out already. I mean, even LeBron at least waited till he got a title before, saying sayonara to happy trails to the team he was on and going somewhere else. I mean, I get it. It's a business, but he's got the money. I mean, he's got $43 million a year. Like, the money's there. So this is just disgraceful is what it is. He's got 4 more years left on his contract. The good news is, at first glance, you can look at it as, the guy really wants to win. But, that kind of attitude usually goes along, team player, type player, and he clearly is not. He's got the money, and the good news is he doesn't have a no trade clause. So the Nets, if they are in fact done with him and do want him out, like he wants out, they can trade him anywhere to whoever wants to pick up that contract. So I'm looking in the standings here. You got the 20-62, 20-62 Houston Rockets, 22-60 Orlando. I'm praying it's one of those teams. Detroit, 23-59. I'm praying it's one of those teams that wants to try and build a team around him, and he does not have no trade clause to say no to it. That would be absolutely spectacular. But yeah, the whole thing's a joke. You just signed the extension last year. Every team in the league except for one is going to end their season not celebrating. Yeah, yours ended a couple rounds earlier than you would have liked, and now you request a trade. It's absolutely ridiculous. Again, you mentioned those names, Jordan, Kobe. These are 2 guys that would never ever request a trade after the Bulls and Lakers, respectively. Not that they really had an early exit for either of them, but you would never hear that coming out of either of those guys, or pretty much any player from those eras. So it's funny, but it's not. It's just disgraceful is what it is.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest comparisons would be a LeBron James situation, and when you look at him, he's been kind of the poster child when it comes to the super team, how different teams are built, and how he was able to work his way onto different teams, and then they end up building around him. The stark contrast between this situation and his situation was he's always just signed shorter term deals, and he plays the life of the contract, and he ends up going to different teams. Like when he ended up leaving Cleveland for the first time, and going to the stuck for a second. The Miami Heat. So he ends up going over there, and he ended up like he played the end of the contract. He ends up going to the Miami Heat, and I'm all about people doing their basically living in their life and making life decisions that are important for them. So he ends up having this rare opportunity where he can join a couple of his friends and play basketball and be able to be successful, and then they ended up winning a couple of titles from there. So that was definitely a great decision on their part. And he then finishes the contract. Then he ends up going to the back to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then he ends up winning a title there, finishes the contract, and then he ends up going to the Los Angeles Lakers. Whether you love LeBron James or not, he didn't hold the team hostage. He didn't say that he was, he demanded a trade midseason. He didn't cost his team immediate assets or cost the team that was acquiring him immediate assets to um, to take away the depth of their team. And right now, it's a situation where whatever team Kevin Durant ends up playing for next is going to be less talented than with him getting there, because they're going to have to trade some depth, and they're going to have to trade some draft picks, and to end up acquiring Kevin Durant. It just seems like if he was really going to feel this way, and if this was really a possibility of happening down the road, then he should have just taken a shorter deal, shorter contract, and then not be able to not hold his teams hostage.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. The one thing I will give LeBron credit for is playing out the length of his contract before packing up and leaving. um, doesn't make him a team player, because he's the ultimate B guy. But yes, at least he did play out the length of his contract before moving on, whereas Kevin Durant clearly not. And it's an awful trend that's going on. Again, I do understand how, I like part of the trend these days in that, the players do have some control. The one league in particular, the NFL, if anybody has, if there's any league that has run it as, team first and the players, with no rights, that's that is shifting, and again, these guys, especially in the NFL, have really short shelf lives, so they want to make a career and make as much money as they can before they wrap it up. So it is good that that the players are getting some kind of control and some kind of a little more rights as to the as to the money they can make and where they can go and whatnot. But there's got to be limits, and 1 year into a 4-year extension, saying I'm out of here, I want out of here, with my $43 million a year because we tanked in the first round. Like that's just not acceptable by any means.
Yeah, it puts the Brooklyn Nets in a really tough. What the Kevin Durant situation is, and players, I think more players are leaning more toward the Kevin Durant way of doing things other than the LeBron James way of doing things, because I don't even think LeBron James has ever signed a deal longer than 4 years, or it always seems like he's a 2 or 3 year deal, see what happens, and then he ends up having his options to move forward. But a lot of the other players, they end up just securing the money and then moving forward. If they want to move on to a different team, then they have to pretty much hamstring the franchise. And this is a Brooklyn Nets team now that has Kyrie Irving, that unfortunately had his situations with the vaccine, and with a personal preference of not wanting to get vaccinated. I don't really think a lot of the blame could be placed on him as far as the situations that he wasn't allowed to play. But even when he was healthy and allowed to play, like he's pretty injury prone, so it's arguable that process ended up making him more available and fresher for the playoff run, being a very, very short-lived playoff run. But you look at it, you have a Kyrie Irving, and then you have a Kevin Durant, and nobody seems to want to be in Brooklyn. And then on top of that, they ended up trading the house for James Harden, and then they end up acquiring James Harden, and then James Harden's like, "Oh man, I'm out of here. I don't want any of this either." And then he ends up going over to the Philadelphia 76ers, and then they get Ben Simmons, who seems to be worse because he didn't even play at all. It's just he claims to have mental health issues and different things like that, but just you have another high impact, high price that is not available to play. So right now, I mean, the Brooklyn Nets seem like a very big mess. And then also the Ben Simmons aspect is that he's on a rookie extension, and you can't have two players on rookie extensions on the same team, of rookie max extensions. So even if they made a trade with the Miami Heat, they wouldn't be able to get Bam Adebayo, who would be obviously a very attractive piece to allure Kevin Durant, because he wouldn't be able to play on the same team as Ben Simmons. So there's a lot of challenges that's going on in the Brooklyn Nets world, and I think that's why it's been going on so long, and it's not going to end very soon, because they still have to move these pieces. The Nets are not budging, and as they shouldn't, because it should be team first and to protect themselves and not lose out and just get rid of somebody just because they don't want to be there and then not get the return that they should be getting.
Yeah, no, I mean you hit it right on the head. The Brooklyn tried the super team route that LeBron started. It worked in Miami for him. It worked in LA with him. It worked in Golden State, which coincidentally had Kevin Durant on it, and the Knicks, the Nets tried and it blew up in their faces. And now what are they going to do? Because they've got one giant contract in Irving, and now you got one that wants to leave, and and it started with the James Harden mess. So Brooklyn's who knows? It's gonna take a genius of a GM to keep that team competitive for the next couple of years, because they're looking like they may implode on these contracts. And you know what? And just as an objective sports fan, again, I said I didn't really like the way that it's heading with guys who can just say, I demand a trade, I want out of here, after voluntarily signing a ridiculous contract. I don't like the way that's heading. So I didn't like the way that this super team thing was heading either. I mean, I remember when LeBron went to Miami and Dwayne Wade was already there, and I think he recruited, Chris Bosh, I think was the third. I didn't like it. Was pretty much Miami and then the rest of the league at that point, 2 years there. And I didn't really like the way that, especially as an objective sports fan, because again, I don't for that as a super team